Well, hello. So, I am going to do a little kind of a review on probably two of my favorite bikes that I've ever ridden. I have been on probably my 10 years of riding and racing. I've probably been on 40 different road bikes, and I have had the Pinarello Prince when they first went to carbon. I had upgraded to the F8, F10, F12. I had the F briefly. Um, I went to disc on the F12 and found it was far too stiff, and I just did not get on with disc. That was the first time I've ever tried it besides a mountain bike. And I mean, everyone's, I'm sure, going to blast me, but I prefer rim. It's just a lot simpler to work on. It's lighter. Disc, I just always seem to be running into a problem, just kind of fine tuning everything. But anyways, for the simplicity of racing and just training, I just rim all the way for me. Anyways, besides the point, the F10 is probably the best dogma I have ever ridden. Best Pinarello I've ever ridden. It is a little more plush than the F8. The F8 was very, very stiff. It almost reminded me of the Tarmac SL3, which to me, to this day, is one of the best riding race bikes that I've ever ridden. Except the F10 to me takes the cake. It's obviously kind of more or less cutting edge aerodynamics. I still think it is the leader when it comes to aero, even with all the new modern frames. Compared to the F12 in particular, one thing I noticed versus the F10 is a lot more narrower in the head tube. I have measured the head tube on the F12 and the F, so the two newest models, and I'm not kidding. They are roughly 18 millimeters wider than the F10 and F8. And I do believe that comes with some benefit, as along with having thinner tires, or narrower tires, they should be, in theory, more aerodynamic. I mean, besides all the new rim width and all that aside, I still think thinner is technically faster or narrower. The tube as well, the down tube is also significantly more narrow than the F12 and the F, and I noticed back here as well, the chain stays, the way they come out, they don't flare out as much as the two new models, and I think that does have a role in overall aerodynamics, especially when the yaw gets very narrow. But anyways, this is, I would have to say, my favorite modern day race bike. It's just the complete package. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Another thing to point out too, Tour Magazine, all their aero testing, I have purchased almost every magazine since they started testing the Pinarellos, and to this day, it's one of the fastest frames. You don't really find it anywhere now, but they show approximately, what was it? I think like 202 watts is what they show. They have like a test dummy, but they only have the legs and then obviously the bike. There's no torso. But yeah, that's up there until, like, I think last year. I forgot I think the one frame that tested slightly faster beat it, I think, by like 2 watts or something like that. But that frame I'm talking about too, when they tested it with a single chain ring, no front derailleurs. So I really think if you tested the F10 against any of the modern frames, I think this would come out the winner when it comes to pure aerodynamics. Anyways, I digress. I felt compelled ultimately to make this video because I have just tested this bike for probably since 2017 when it first came out. And like I said, absolutely adore the thing. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. To the right of the Pinarello, I have probably my favorite, most coveted bike ever. At one point was a dream bike of mine, despite having Pinarellos. And I'll just go on and show you. The Colnago C40. This is a 2002 model. It is a size 48 sloping, which is actually pretty rare for a C40 at the time because they all came with the standard non-sloping or horizontal top tube. I love it. It's a little bit more compact, looks a little bit more modern. And I would probably go as far to say I would imagine it's a little bit stiffer. I have had 4 C40s. This is the 4th one. This is going to be my forever bike. One of the reasons I love it so much, this thing is actually built in Italy, designed with Ferrari. Way back in the late 80s, Ernesto Colnago, if none of you guys, or if some of you guys don't know, met with Enzo Ferrari and they collaborated. And Enzo basically said to Colnago at the time that carbon fiber is the future of basically anything race. And they were using their F1 cars at the time. And anyways, long story short, they developed a couple models in carbon fiber together, and ultimately they came out with the C40, uses carbon fiber lugs. And, different at the time when people were using, or manufacturers were using aluminum lugs, and they were kind of messing around with carbon fiber tubes. This is all carbon fiber. Some call it a carbon monocoque because it is all ultimately one piece. I just think it's absolutely gorgeous. The straight fork, they were one of the very first manufacturers to use a straight fork, and that also came from the development of Ferrari. Their R&D department, they said it was, in all their tests they did, stiffer, had better shock absorption. Don't really understand how all that worked, but apparently in all their testing, that's how it came out. And I mean, can't really argue with the fact that today, majority of the manufacturers seem to have a straight fork, more or less. Anyways, I absolutely love the I cannot think of this word, but the indentations in here that they took from the Master. They said they were the crimp tubing. There we go. It was said to make it a little bit stiffer, but it just makes it unique. At the time, bicycles more or less kind of look the same, almost like people kind of complain about today. But I think it just gives its own little uniqueness. Like I said, 100% made in Italy. I just absolutely love that. You still see these frames out on the road. You don't really hear of any issues with them. I mean, obviously it won Paris-Roubaix a shit ton of times. You didn't see any of them breaking in races. And it's just an overall super durable frame. And if you ask people who are into cycling, they will tell you that the Colnago C40 is generally one of the best riding bikes they've ever been on. And that is why I feel compelled to make this video ultimately, is to compare these two bikes. Two of my favorite bikes I've ever owned, ever ridden, and I plan on keeping for the rest of my life. That's how good they are. The C40, being significantly older, still holds up to a very modern bike. I've had a C40, probably my first one in 2014, 2015, and really haven't looked back since. Like I said, the only reason I had 4 models of them is just because I wanted to try like the different versions out. This is the Mark III. It has the B-stay. The one after this, so the 4th generation, it had the diamond cutout in the chain stays. Anyways, I've heard mixed feelings on that. It doesn't do anything. Some say it's a little bit stiffer. I've heard generally this model, or this version 3, is the best riding of them all. Anyways, I love it. How they compare. Weight-wise, they are actually the same. With the same wheels, they weigh identical. I have the same exact handlebar width. I'm running 36s on both of them. And they are literally from hood to hood, they are the same width on both bikes. I have the setup. It might not look from here because the floor does angle down a little bit, but they are the exact same height, saddle height and all. And so the F10, definitely you can feel more of the stiffness. When you're going into a corner, you're going up a sharp hill, and I'm not talking getting on the saddle sprinting, just kind of, doing your zone 2 pace. You definitely feel like the F10 feels a little more urgent. It's kind of hard to explain, and it is it rides beautifully, the F10. It soaks up bumps really well. That is not the same for the F8 and the F12. They do not soak up bumps well. You feel they're very jarring, kind of like the Tarmac SL3, which I love that. But anyways, I'm only 32, but I do kind of like the compliance side because I do notice it. Now, however, on the Colnago, it is a little different. It rides unlike anything else I've ever ridden before. It's going to be kind of difficult to explain. It's one of those things you got to ride it to know, but I would almost say when you're sitting on it, everything just feels dialed in. It almost feels like you're sitting in the cockpit of a race car or like a fighter jet. It really does. The F10, on the other hand, almost feels like I'm sitting on top. Everything feels right. It just not, I can't quite put a finger on it. But the C40, it just feels so at home. Everything feels relaxed. Any kind of effort I'm doing, it just feels right. And it could be the slight give the frame has because you feel it when you pedal, but like you get in a rhythm. I've only heard similar stories or sensations, you could say, with like steel bikes, just because they kind of have that give, and they sometimes term it as, or coin it as, planing. And it could just gel really well with me. I'm not sure, but this thing just rides phenomenal. It soaks up bumps. It almost feels like it has suspension. It is absolutely amazing. If you haven't tried one, you have to try one. You can put so much more pressure on the tires, and it still feels super compliant. And the interesting thing is it gives more feedback through the road than the F10. The F10 will glide over certain things, and then when it gets really, like, if there's a lot of chip and seal, you'll really feel it on the F10. You bounce around. The C40, you really just glide over it, but it's weird because, like, if you were to roll over, say, like a quarter on the F10, you wouldn't feel it. You roll over the quarter on the C40, and you feel, you can almost feel like if it's head or tails. It just the feedback on the C40 gives that little bit more. That just makes it, when you're riding it, you're just like, how can this bike be so good? This was before all the, they really had like the computer analysis down to do their simulations. It's just, it blows my mind, honestly. It's that good. Once this thing gets up to speed, descending wise, I think it's better than the F10 or any of the Dogmas that I've ridden. Just the geometry, to me, just feels that much better. I don't know how to explain it. It's just, it doesn't really, it dives. Like, you turn it, it dives into corners, but when you're going a little bit slower, everything just feels so neutral. But as soon as the speed starts picking up, say 30 miles an hour and up, it just feels like you're putting it into race mode. It just gets so sharp. And there's kind of the front view on it. You can just see how narrow everything is. The fork profile is super, super narrow. And that, yep, you can kind of see how narrow the down tube is as well. Everything, it's really like, what, 1.5 inches, and then it does get a little bit wider as you come down to the lug over here. But anyways, another really interesting thing is on the C40, because I'll use the same Asioma power meter pedals, or dual-sided. And for whatever reason, when I'm, say, doing intervals, it obviously feels slightly better doing intervals on a more modern bike. Everything just feels kind of more dialed in, and I think that's because clearly this 11-speed Campanolo mechanical group set shifts better than the record 10-speed. I've had 5 of each group set, and the 10-speed stuff to me just is not, you can get it dialed in all you want, but to me it's not as tactical as, or tactile as, the modern group sets, at least mechanical wise. To me, they're not. But I've recently been taking the C40 out a good bit more, and when I'm doing my intervals, I mean, it's crazy. I kid you not. Like threshold intervals, I'm doing 10 to 15 watts more on the C40. I really do not know why. I always feel a little bit stronger on this bike. It is the strangest phenomenon. And I really think the whole planing thing, I've bought a few magazines that kind of go more into detail from Bicycle Quarterly on that. And I do believe there is something to it. Everything nowadays they're showing, they're test like, aerodynamics. It seems more marketing than actual tests. I do believe in aero. And with that said, going to the aero, I have also done my fair share of real-world tests on a variety of different courses with 7 to 10 minute mountain climbs, shorter hills. I've done flat courses out and back, circuits, days where the wind is like minimal, where it is like literally probably close to 0 degrees of yaw, if not, within 5 degrees plus or minus either side. And if I get enough interest, I will release the data that I have collected, and you will be pretty sure you'll be shocked because it kind of goes against what modern day research is saying with the new aero frames, at least for my testing with the C40 versus the F10. I've tested the F10 also aerodynamic wise on these tests that I'm discussing now with other frames that are more of a round tube type of frame, like think Tarmac SL3, and the F10 blows it out of the water when it comes to aerodynamics. And I'm talking same setups. I'll go into all that detail later. Like I said, if there's more interest, I will release all the details on that. And like I said, you will not be disappointed. You might be disappointed. Depends which side of the fence you are on. But like I said, the C40, going back to the power and everything, when I'm doing the efforts, everything just feels perfect. Everything just feels like physically my body feels dialed in on it. Everything feels super comfortable, relaxed where it needs to be. And despite the group set kind of giving me some issues, I am, like I said, on threshold intervals, I'm putting out 10 to 15 watts more than the F10. And another really interesting thing with the power meter pedals, because it'll give you your split, between your left leg and your right leg, how much power you're putting out. And I kid you not, and I have the data to back it up. On the F10, I am usually between 47 to 48% on the left, and the rest of it, so 52, 53 on the right, power-wise. And I kid you not, C40, almost every time I ride her, I come back with a 50-50 split most of the time. So there's something going on. Like I said, I can't quite put a finger on it because the measurements are near identical. When I was riding today on the F10, I did notice that the seat is a little bit higher. I think 1/4 of a centimeter. If that, might be a little bit less, might be more like 1/8 than the C40. And I think the C40 I don't think it slipped. I have it marked. But anyways, this is going to conclude today. I just wanted to bring this to people's attention. The C40 also, you can find them. They hold their value extremely well. You can find them obviously on eBay. You can find them on Facebook Marketplace. I know it's becoming more and more popular. It really is a frame that I believe more people need to check out. And they are pretty coveted, I would say, right now. For any of the frames of that era, these things really, they're still around. You don't really hear of many issues with them. And I think that has a lot to say with how they're built. To me, there's just a lot more passion about at least this era of Colnago. It's just absolutely beautiful. Anyways, that's it for today. Leave comments down below. This is the first video, like I said, I've ever made, so don't go too hard on me. If there's anything else you'd like to know or see, please let me know in the comment section. All right, see ya.